the aspirations of New Zealand to be a security member in United Nations in 2015 to 16. So this will be a prelude, because in that meeting there will be over 50 prominent speakers all over the world that attended, and MPs attending. We are talking about prominent politicians that sit together, rub shoulders, like Professor said just now. During Choga meeting, no reporters, 4 eyes contact, head of government department sit, no diplomacy words that use. You can say anything. And are you saying that Commonwealth is not relevant? Will it only become relevant if we read newspaper, just splash it out? What newspaper splash out actually are the things that, oh, it is not relevant now because it is not practicing its core value. What is the core value? The core value is human right. What is human right? Then each nation will have its own definition of what is human right. See, Malaysia's democracy somehow is based on the basic democracy. You have separation of powers. But then again, our democracy also formulated based on our core values as Malaysians. It's Muslims, it's Indians, it's Chinese. And although some say that Malaysia is a secular state, some say it is an Islamic state. If it is an Islamic state, you don't allow homosexuality because CPA is allowed that, because religion is allowed that. So that is where we differ. But that is the small thing that we differ. We can discuss that in meetings like what has been mentioned by Professor just now. So again, I will reiterate that Commonwealth is still relevant. If we want it to be more relevant, then we must identify what are the new challenges. Is it democracy now? Is it economy? If it is economy, then Malaysia also will have a choice. Malaysia doesn't have to be tied with Commonwealth. But then again, the Royal Society of Commonwealth, I can make the research. They said that if 2 Commonwealth members, countries, were to have trade between them, then it is, I think they said it is definitely that 1/3 or more than half of the trade that they can make if they were to make, compare, if they don't make business with other countries. These are the things that are not highlighted. In the Commonwealth Charter also is not even highlighted.
Thank you.
Okay, very quickly, going back to Datuk's point. At the end of the day, I think regardless of what position countries take, they have to put their money where their mouth is. The Commonwealth, I think, is already under-resourced. Its budget has been cut already quite considerably. Every year it's been cut for the last 10 years. The most crippling blow would be when Canada, which has been the largest contributor to the Commonwealth, has now decided to withhold its contributions. And under the Commonwealth rules, if you don't pay for 3 years, you're out. So in a way, unless something is done, the Commonwealth may die a natural death, starved of financial resources. But this once again comes back to the very fundamental issue. Are we trying to find an agenda for the Commonwealth? I don't think that's a question. Yes. If we're going to have to find a work agenda for the Commonwealth, if the Commonwealth is already irrelevant, we'll stop. But I think the more important thing is this. Yes, there's a huge agenda out there which needs to be done. And the question is there any other body, UN or otherwise, that's capable of doing it better than the Commonwealth? And I think if one looks at it from that perspective, and one accepts the reality, and after all, don't forget that Commonwealth has already gone through a one name change. It is no longer the British Commonwealth. It is now the Commonwealth. Okay? And I think once again, I come back to the question of rebranding it. It's got to be rebranded, relooked at again. And it was seen as a very meaningful, demand-driven alternative to the UN on a number of issues which are of particular relevance to the LDCs and in particular small island states. I think the point was made about the environment, Langkawi, yes, 1989. I think, of course, that stemmed, as you know, from the Brundtland Commission's report, way back before that, of which Seri was a key member, and where it expounded the concept of environmentally sound and sustainable development, which led to Rio. So in some respects, the Commonwealth also was responsible there, likely. But the question is, how does one take that downstream? At what point will one say, I've done my job? So unless there's a new setup around the place, you can revamp the existing ones, but in the process you have to, more important, change mindsets. You have to change mindsets. And then you can, with the new mindsets, you can approach or come up with new approaches to the very new problems that the world is now facing in all areas. Security, economics, politics is all there. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Do you want to also address the point about the people-to-people contacts?
People, I mean the program.
No. The issues, I mean,
Sorry.
events like the Commonwealth Games. And
I mean, the Commonwealth, obviously, we go back in terms of the original term was the Commonwealth of Nations, the Commonwealth family. And within that, you have three different kinds of organizations which were there. Directly was a secretariat to run, of course, the Commonwealth. And as an offshoot of that, of course, you had the Royal Commonwealth Society, then you had the Royal Commonwealth Games. Although the word Commonwealth is used, the only thing they have in common is that the Queen is the head of all of them. And the Queen, again, Her Majesty will be opening the games in Edinburgh, I think, in 9 days' time. She'll be there. And incidentally, the head of the Commonwealth Federation is our Malaysian, Tukupi Imran. He's there. So we find once again there's a very, very strong bond between both of them. But the question that comes up, will the Commonwealth Games or will the other affiliate bodies in the Commonwealth still carry on, like the round table here, if the Commonwealth Secretariat disappears? Will the Commonwealth carry on if for some reason or other there are changes in the palace? So I think rather than wait for the inevitable, rather than start predicting, I think it's good, because you have said, eminent persons group, a very hard look. Should we carry on or should we just wind up? Because the very same countries that have been insisting that the Commonwealth should carry on have been the most reluctant countries to come up and contribute to the coffers. And that's reality. Somebody has got to pay for it. Okay.
Thank you. Can I just add in terms of the people-to-people contacts? Now, a lot of it actually takes place in forums that are in unofficial Commonwealth. I can give you an example from my own field, the Commonwealth Lawyers Association. Now, there is, although it is not as visible as some of the bigger organizations or bigger events, there is a lot of very tangible work happening. The Commonwealth Lawyers Association organizes a meeting one of the biggest law conferences every other year. And there is a lot of silent but important work being carried out as a result of contacts. Sometimes these meetings attract over 1,000 delegates. And so there's a lot of work going on. There's a Commonwealth Magistrates and Judges Association to which reference has been made. Now there again, in very tangible terms, mutual assistance in terms of criminal law matters, etc., to take place. Of course, the bigger events such as the one you mentioned, the Commonwealth Games, but also don't forget the People's Forum, which happens before each Chogam. There's a lot of interaction. So there is already happening a lot of people contacts, but obviously that can be strengthened, that can be increased. Resources, as always, is the single biggest impediment to any advancement of that cause. So I'll leave that there. Do you want to add something?
I just want to hear again the issue of Commonwealth values. What do you mean by Commonwealth? If something to do about common mission, common objective, I mean, that's something good. It's about sharing common wealth. Wealth we share. Here we are talking about from small states to developed states. That's something, I mean, normally in this room or normally from I mean, all the members can disagree on that. But the question is this: are you going to destroy something which I would say easily can be shared by human beings, a group of human beings together at one point of time, and doing something beneficial for their countries, outside their countries, just like that? The reason I ask this: we have no more leaders like Sukarno, who can call Bandung Conference for Non-Alliance Movement in 1955. That era's past. But of course, that era will be replaced. We need top-down, bottom-up leaders with the technologies whatsoever to call people again. But the question is this: I'm convinced what really connect people more than technology is culture, history. Somehow you may be surprised. You find more Malaysian than Oxford Street in London. Somehow, I don't know where, you ask you ask lawyers, you ask my uncles, my aunties, whoever, say, where are you going? London. Somehow you feel like your second home. So for me, I realized this kind of appreciation, I would say agitations of uncertainty, it must come from some things which been planned and organized at the official and unofficial levels. For example, after I stepped down, let's not say step down, I didn't contest. All of a sudden, one chap called me up. Yusmadi, can you be a chair of the Earth Award? I said, what is Earth Award? You know that Earth Award is one so-called Nobel Prize for the environment, initiated by Malaysian, a joint project from the Prince Charles, together with our Tunku Mizan. It was organized twice in Marlborough House. Not any program can be organized at that, August House. And that was supported by Commonwealth Foundation. So you are talking about, there are many, I would say, structure or support system, if any you want to call it, been built officially, can be a support system. If you are talking about track 1 diplomacy, G2G, you have it, all the things. You are talking about, like my gentleman talked about just now, about Commonwealth Games, you have it. But my point is this: if you only talk about Commonwealth from the economic point of view, I think we're going to lose again. But for me, if you are talking about Commonwealth from the angle that what is the Commonwealth as well, the wealth is actually what we have, rich of culture, rich of history together. What more from the educational assistance, educational interaction, scholastic, whatever you name it. We used to have a Commonwealth scholar, we have so many other things. I think Commonwealth will still become relevant. The reason I say so, we thought, because Commonwealth really taught us, at least again, I say it again in DC, I say it again here, we thought so-called this indicator of development, governance, rule of law, human rights, is something that the indicator to judge modernity of certain country, to judge certain ideals of development. But you'd be surprised. The real key words for me as I'm convinced as a young man or young leaders is something what I'm saying is interaction. For me, the words of the day which make Commonwealth relevant or irrelevant is interaction. We have less interaction. But one thing I can tell you, whatever you mentioned about certain country foreign policy, it can be America, it can be China, it can be EU. The level of interaction that's happening at the G2G level, at the people-to-people levels, is more than what Commonwealth is doing. The reason I can tell you, 5 years in Parliament, very short, let me share you more. You hardly have any programs, I would say people-to-people programs, apart from what we call it, MP, CPA meetings, which I believe, if Commonwealth can be redesigned, or Professor talked about rebrand. I'm not talking about that, I'm just talking about realignment. You're doing something great. Do more interaction, and of course for me, one of the key diplomacy, I would say, angle which I would like to propose is cultural diplomacy. The people are talking about, let's talk about security. People don't believe that what makes you feel secure, the day you understand more about each other. How to understand more, you have to interact more. And we are talking about even within this country, in Malaysia, the cultural diplomacy between the Chinese, between the Indian, what more between the East and West, between Borneo, is not happening. So when there is no interaction, how you can have understanding? So then you are talking about Commonwealth will remain like big dinosaur, misunderstood dinosaur, with a good history, with a good success story. So for me, if any, someone were to rebrand, they have to redesign the model of leadership, the model of entrepreneurship of Commonwealth. So I think back to what Tan Sri said, which I agree totally. Certain thing I thought is management, but more than management is leadership, which I believe is Commonwealth to be relevant again is about leadership.
Thank you. I think we have enough time for just one round of questions and answers. Can I request you to please keep your comments or questions brief? Who wants to kick off? Yes.
This one. Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what about, don't you think that, personally I think that isn't the Commonwealth the real reason it exists is purely because that Britain is a superpower, and if it's not, then the Commonwealth basically doesn't exist. So isn't that true?
You want to respond quickly to that?
Very, very quick. I think it's not a question of being a superpower or whatnot. The Commonwealth, of course, with the process of decolonization, countries have become sovereign states on their own. So in a way, in fact, it's also up to them whether they want to join the Commonwealth or not. And although Britain moved towards Europe increasingly, the Commonwealth has still stayed on for 20 or 30 years. So in many respects to me, Britain is no longer a very critical dependent variable. It might be a moderating variable, but certainly not a dependent variable as far as the future of the Commonwealth is concerned.
Thank you. Can I just also remind the audience that when we talk so much about the Commonwealth being an association of former British colonies, it is worth remembering that at least two members of the Commonwealth are not members of the former British Empire, Rwanda and Mozambique. And of course there is a queue of countries which don't necessarily have any connection to the British Empire who want to join the Commonwealth. In addition to the names that were mentioned earlier by Professor Selva, he referred to Burma, I think. There is, yes, also mooted the possibility, though we don't know if it's going to happen in the near future, of Ireland